How will the government get a national price on carbon when some of the provinces say no dice? Will they force a price on carbon to meet their 2030 emissions goals? Let's find out. Joining me now, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, Catherine McKenna. Great to have you here.
Great to be on the show.
I also like to full disclose everyone. I've known Catherine McKenna and our families have known each other long before she entered politics. I couldn't help it that she entered politics, but here you are. Will the government, because the timelines are short, when will you set a national price on carbon?
So we know as part of our climate change plan to meet our international target that we need to have a price on carbon. And actually it's the best way to reduce emissions, foster innovation. In fact, 30 companies have signed on board to our carbon pricing leadership coalition. So major energy companies and the big banks, they're all saying we need to price it. So I have spent a lot of time and energy traveling across the country. I've met bilaterally with my counterparts. I've met in groups. And we're having really good discussions, and we're committed to having a price on carbon in the fall. Now, we've talked...
Okay, hold on, stop.
Yeah?
That's the news item, so I want to focus. You will have a national price on carbon in the fall, so that's somewhere before November, is that right?
Well, by the first ministers' meeting. So the date's still being determined, so that's something...
But it's got to be before November 7th, so it's got to be sometime October. So will that be a uniform national price? All provinces have to meet that national price.
So the bottom line is we have two systems right now. We only have two systems. We have a carbon tax, where we have two provinces that have a carbon tax, and then we also have a cap and trade system, Ontario and Quebec. And we think it's great. We think that it's great that four provinces have it. 80% of Canadians already live in a jurisdiction where there's a price on carbon. We've been very clear that we need to have every jurisdiction having a price on carbon, that it doesn't work.
But you're skating. I know that you're saying they all have a price. I want to know if there will be a uniform national price. Not a patchwork, you have one, you have a different one, a uniform national price.
I mean, I think what you need to look at is how we actually meet our reductions. So when you have a tax, they're different systems, right? So it is complicated to figure out how to ensure that you're meeting your objectives, which is ultimately reducing emissions and meeting our target. So what we've been clear on is there are no other mechanisms. There's a tax, right, and then there's a cap and trade system. And everyone has to make sure that they have a price. They have to make sure it's effective. And in a tax, the tax has to go up. We know that, to reduce emissions. In a cap and trade system, you need to make sure that you're reducing your emissions.
Okay, and but there's problems on both. I want to pick up on that, but let's just go back, because the question is there going to be, because this is what you have said previously, the Prime Minister said, there will be a uniform price on carbon. I know you have a cap and trade. At some point, they've got to be some target levels and a price on carbon that's uniform. Will it be mandatory? Will it be uniform?
So it's mandatory that everyone will have to have a price on carbon. But you have to look at two different systems. You can't just say, here's a price, because they actually work differently. But what we're saying is that every province needs to have a similar approach. We have two systems. We're going to need to figure out equivalency on those systems. Right. And if provinces don't do that, the federal government will provide a backstop.
What does that mean? So let's say Saskatchewan. Brad Wall's coming on the show. He's going to say, sorry, Minister McKenna, we don't want this. What do you do with Saskatchewan?
Look, I've said, everyone knows that this is the way you need to go, including companies that operate in Saskatchewan are saying, put a price on carbon, price pollution, because we will innovate. We will find ways.
But the Premier says he doesn't want to do it.
Well, we've always said that this is something that we need to be doing, and we think the provinces are best suited to design the system. So I'd certainly encourage all provinces, and we're having great discussions with all of them to figure out what works.
You said there'd be a backstop. If they reject it, what do you do?
We will have a system.
You'll impose a system?
Yeah.
You'll impose a system?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if they don't comply, what happens? Penalties if they don't comply?
Well, the big issue is what you do with revenues. So you've seen BC's revenue neutral. They give the money back through tax cuts. We're looking at what we would do with the revenues. I think that's an interesting model. So in the case of Saskatchewan, they could design a system where the revenues go back through tax cuts.
Okay, you mentioned British Columbia, and you mentioned it's got to be effective. There's no point in doing all this if you don't meet the targets. Currently, your government has kept the targets that Stephen Harper kept, which is a reduction of 30% by 2030 from 2005 levels, okay? Right. BC is the only place with their carbon tax. They have $30 a ton on it. They haven't changed it since 2012. The Premier, Christy Clark, in August, was going to raise it. She had a task force that said, you better raise it or you can't meet your commitments. She said, no way I'm doing that until the other provinces catch up. Then you said, You got to keep raising it, and they've said no. How can you compel the provinces to keep raising it to meet the targets that you and I both know the country is not on target to meet?
Well, we've had good discussions with all provinces, including BC, but I've been very clear. Everyone's clear. They know this. To be effective, a price has to be a price that actually has an impact on behavior. So it's great. BC took a leadership role a number of years ago, but the price hasn't gone up. So they had an expert task force that said to be effective, especially when you're talking about other major projects, the tax has to go up.
So would the federal government, again, impose an obligation on the province to raise that tax?
I've said that there's going to be a federal backstop and that we need a price that's going to be effective. Look, we all know that we need to meet our international targets. And in BC,
I'm just trying to figure out what a backstop, does that mean imposition or on penalties if you don't meet it?
That means that we would have a system that would be imposed, yes. And I think, look, I'm not trying to do that. I think we're trying to go forward in a way that we're working with everyone. As I say, we've got businesses calling for that. BC is a good model. They were able to grow their economy while reducing emissions, while having a tax.
I understand that, but obviously they're concerned that there's an impact on economic growth. Let me just speak of that.
But on economic growth, let me be clear that BC is an example where they grew their economy while they had a carbon tax and they gave them money back in tax cuts. That is a model that other provinces are welcome to use.
I agree, but they've now said that we've hit the limit. And the question, as Tom Mulcahy said about your government, you've kept the Stephen Harper targets. Originally, when you went to Paris, you said these are going to be the floor, not the ceiling. He said you've changed the rhetoric, not the targets. Will you change the targets or keep the Stephen Harper targets?
So when you have a government, the previous government, that did nothing for 10 years and emissions have gone up, we've been very transparent about that. I said to our department, put out where we are in emissions, because I want everyone to see the challenge we have.
But you promised to change it. You criticized the Harper government of having weak targets. Now you've kept the targets. Now you may say that's because nothing was done about it, but I guess I'm just trying to read between. You're basically saying we're keeping the Harper targets.
You know what I'm saying? We're going to take real action for Canadians. We're going to grow our economy. We're going to reduce emissions, and we're going to meet our target.
But your target is the Harper target.
Yeah, but the Harper target was a fake target because they did nothing. It's not a real target. You can put out a target.
It was a target that you may say was a fake target they didn't meet, but it was a target that you also had argued was not a good enough target.
No, what I said is that we will at least beat the target. And that is what I'm committed to. Look, Canadians want real action. They want to see that we're serious. The world is looking for real action. We need to grow our economy and do it in a mindful way. And that's what we're going to do.
I got about less than a minute here, but I got to ask you, I know you were in the hot seat, about $6,600 spent on a photographer at the Paris conference. Now in November, you're going back to another international conference in Morocco. You said you'd go on to make changes around using photographers to communicate messages or on Twitter. Will you hire a photographer for that?
Okay, so let's just be clear. When I went to Paris, I'd been in office for like a couple weeks. The department has a long-standing history of hiring photographers. I did my own pictures. I did my own tweets. They use it for official material, but I've reviewed it.
Some of it was Twitter.
Right? Well, it was the official Twitter account. I have my own account, but you're right. I think we need to make sure that we're mindful about taxpayer money. I'll be going there again. My focus is on negotiating a good deal. It's also on communicating with Canadians. But no, we're not going to have a photographer, although I'm going to continue to make sure that the messaged out, and that will include pictures. But I must say that all governments have done this, and I think it's important that we not stop communicating, because what Canadians like is seeing a government operate in a transparent manner. Will they understand what's going on? And that's my commitment.
Okay, so more transparency on that. All right, I got to leave it there. I really appreciate your time. You meet the other environment ministers in October?
Yeah, beginning of October.
Beginning of October, and then there'll be a First Minister's meeting with the Prime Minister, and then November. You got a busy fall ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, we're going to get a deal, though.
You're going to get a deal. Yeah. All right, well, we'll find out.